Value Impulses with Dr. Ulrich Vogel. Personnel Diagnostics Insights, Leadership, Assessments, and Personnel Development. A warm and heartfelt welcome, dear listeners, to our podcast episode today. Today, I'm focusing on the, yes, in my opinion, often underestimated word problem in a positive sense, even if that sounds paradoxical, and the overestimated word target group. And yes, I'd like to bring you a bit closer to this idea so that we can develop new perspectives on understanding customers and how they feel. And in doing so, I also want to broaden the concept of empathy a bit further. First section, today with me, the word problem. A lot of people say, hang on a second, problem, that's the wrong word, it's way too focused on problems, on problem thinking. And so on. And then we have to use words like challenges or something else so that we don't use this terrible word problem. Well, in my opinion, that's nonsense, to be perfectly clear, and I'm also referring to the famous philosopher here, Karl Popper, who said that all of life is problem solving, and that's exactly how it is, from getting up in the morning to going to bed at night. Throughout our entire conscious lives, we're basically trying to achieve our goals, or at first just to survive, and we do that by overcoming the obstacles we encounter. And what's important here is that we use proactivity and energy to overcome exactly these hurdles. That means keeping the focus on solving things. That's why Karl Popper also says, all of life is problem solving, not that all of life is a problem. And that's that. The problem is that many people remain stuck in a victim mentality, drift into self-pity, and rely on what's called the external locus of control. That means the psychological pattern of saying, yeah, control comes from outside of me, the circumstances are just the way they are, and there's nothing you can do about it anyway. In contrast to that is the internal locus of control, the belief that I can absolutely make a difference through my actions. So the message here is, problems need to be recognized, and recognizing the problem is actually the first step towards a solution. And then you continue on the path to a solution. And yes, if you bring up Stephen Covey, whom I often reference here, that's actually his first habit in the 7 habits of highly effective people. Namely, to act proactively. It's like a muscle. If you train it, it gets easier and easier. And if you use that as an example and apply it to customers, then it's really about seeing customer problems as opportunities for innovation and improvement. And the question here, or rather the topic, is to put the customer at the center of attention. And that's why, I believe, you can definitely see problems as something very positive, provided you understand them the right way, namely as a step-by-step movement towards a solution. Second section, why the target group is overrated. I just think it's too sterile. Of course, when you look at things strategically, you do have to narrow down all of humanity to some extent. That's true, but let me bring Hartman's perspective back in here. Every person is a singularity, a cosmic event. So it's not like we should lump everyone together. Of course, there are shared criteria, that's true, but they often tempt you to stay too much on the strategic and also the functional surface. To stay there. And that makes it impersonal. And that's what I want to counteract, because people are emotional, they're social beings. They need closeness, they need warmth, and individuality is essential, even in the nuclear family, in the tribe, in the group. And this warmth and protection, of course, has partly to do with actual cold, but also with something else. It's also, in mammals, and for us as humans, due to our upright posture. Because we give birth earlier, the children we bring into the world need a lot more protection, human warmth, and so on, compared to other mammals. That becomes pretty clear when you see them being born, a zebra, a giraffe, or whatever, they can stand up and start walking within just a few minutes. As we know, it's a bit different for us. So the message here is, customers aren't groups, they're individual people with unique needs. And that's exactly how we need to approach things. That's why a consultant needs to understand the specific context of a customer. A human resources manager needs to understand a specific case, a person who might be having problems. Or, in the case of a high-potential employee who needs special development measures, you have to recognize and understand that. I'm moving on to the third section now to expand the idea of empathy by introducing the concept of emphasis. We're all familiar with empathy. As a basic definition, I've actually done an episode about it. That's episode 3 of the podcast, where you can listen for a more detailed explanation. Being able to understand the feelings and perspectives of others. So, the difference from sympathy in this case is that it's not just about liking someone, but about truly understanding them. And truly understanding someone isn't all that easy. That's why I'm bringing in the concept of emphasis here as well. It's about that, so to speak. It's the combination of empathy and proactive willingness to empathize for those certified in profiling values. The diamond shape in empathy, so to speak, is about opening up this interpersonal window, not just being open to the feelings of others, but also letting your own feelings out through that window, emphasizing them, creating an emotional intensity, an emotional substance, in order to engage more deeply with the message. So, from both sides, it's about emotionally touching and moving others as well. That way, you also learn more about the other person because he or she opens up as well. What I'm trying to say is that empathy is more about the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, reading the other person, really listening closely, which is important too. But to go deeper, you need emphasis. And with some training, you can achieve more in your interactions here. Conscious interaction, changing perspectives, but also exchanging feelings, let's call it that, so showing your own emotions and, as a result, being able to receive more from others as well. Everyone knows about active listening, also from Carl Rogers, but I've also brought in Stephen Covey here. I think that's the fourth habit. First seek to understand, then to be understood. And understanding is more than just listening. That's my message here. That brings me to the fourth section, which is not just about understanding the customer's perspective, but also about actually feeling it. So how can we actually approach this in practice? Get started. So, typically, what can you ask the customer? Or, from my experience, what are some typical challenges? When a coach or consultant, these are my clients, talks to me when I do an interview with them, and we talk about these things, certain aspects always come up. Like, as a coach or consultant, how do I actually do my marketing? How do I become visible? What technical things do I still have to deal with? Maybe I'm not interested in technology at all, but I'm a solopreneur. I don't have a bunch of assistants. I have to manage everything myself. How do I actually set my prices? How does my work with clients have an impact, or how can I increase its effectiveness? What is the financial situation like? Of the coaches and consultants I talk to, what are their priorities, and what about their clients' priorities? So, you always have to. I also learned this at Mercury Urwald, my first job in management consulting. You have to think about your clients' customers. So, how can I help my clients so that they can serve their own clients even better or provide them with more value? Or, if I look at another group of my clients, namely HR managers, what really drives them? How do I manage to really fill suitable roles with the right people? How do I manage to get this right in the long run? How do I manage to reduce bureaucracy? For me, HR sometimes feels like a dumping ground, maybe even a graveyard, for everything that comes with reporting obligations and all sorts of things. Whether it's mandated by lawmakers or comes from social security systems. And who knows what else. All sorts of things come up. How can I, as an HR manager, develop my own culture? How can I shape internationalization? And for that, we need to go deeper than just, let's say, rationally asking what's important for this or that person, for my client. What matters to me is to actively put myself in the client's shoes. Observe, listen, ask questions, empathize. What does my client really need? So, it's about the different value dimensions. Yes, what does the client need strategically? Brain dimension, systemic dimension. What do they need? Operationally, creatively, from a hands-on perspective. And what do they need emotionally, from the heart, in terms of the human values perspective? So, I want to broaden the understanding of the client here, to consciously say so. Customer understanding, customer comprehension, you could put it that way when it comes to operational matters, and empathizing with the customer. When it comes to the emotional side of things, and I'll quote my very first trainer in management consulting again, who said, "There's only one mortal sin in consulting, and really, you could say this applies outside of consulting too, namely, a lack of interest in the client." So, yeah, how do we get from understanding to the solution? Well, obviously, diagnostics is a key. Here at Profiling Values, we know this. Tools like profiling values help capture customer needs and, accordingly, develop realistic and actionable solutions. For example, how I, as a consultant, can build trust through clear analysis. I've actually done a few podcast episodes on this as well. I think that's the case. From episodes 61 to 66, to ultimately create a transformation for the client. To make that possible. So, the goal isn't just to identify the problem and find a solution, but to achieve real change. That means moving from solving a specific case to finding lasting solutions. Yeah, my conclusion, and maybe a bit of a call to action at this point, summed up. Try rethinking the problems and, yes, I'll say it again, the target groups, by really getting into the minds of the individual people. Don't be afraid to do that. Do interviews, talk more in depth with your clients and potential clients. See empathy as a bridge, as a first step. And see emphasis as the movement towards a solution. And I can tell you, this is also my own experience. Through a deep understanding of your customers, the solutions you come up with become truly meaningful and ultimately satisfying for you as well. And I invite you to reflect on that yourself. Which problem of a very specific customer do you actually want to solve? Really dig into it with all your senses, with your mind, your hands, and your heart, and see what insights you come up with. Thank you so much for sticking with this episode right to the end. I'm always happy to get feedback on any channel. No matter how, you can reach me pretty much anywhere, of course on LinkedIn and by email too, so I can keep improving. Still, I'm already looking forward to the next episodes and hope you'll join me again. Bye.